Serious. What is the creepiest slash strangest slash scariest experience you ever had in your life? Attention. Serious. Tag notice. Jokes, puns, and off-topic comments are not permitted in any comment, parent or child. Parent comments that aren't from the target group will be removed, along with their child replies. Report comments that violate these rules. Posts that have few relevant answers within the first hour, and posts that are not appropriate for the serious tag will be removed. Consider doing an AMA request instead. Thanks for your cooperation and enjoy the discussion. I am a bot, and this action was performed automatically. Please contact the moderators of this subreddit if you have any questions or concerns. This was like 40 years ago. My mom and dad and I were driving in a very rural part of Indiana. I was about 10 years old and sitting in the back seat. As we crossed a short bridge over a stream, I looked out my window and saw a naked woman tied to a tree. I told my dad what I saw, and he reversed the car back over the bridge. To this day I am grateful to him for believing a little kid. Anyway, as we drove back over the stream, we could see that the property owner had tied a mannequin to a tree with a "keep out" sign over her head. Sick mofo. That haunted me for years. I had a similar-ish experience, except I was there for the setup. My parents have a vacation house in a popular tourist area in New England, very well known for a river that many people go to for tubing and kayak trips. The house is in a neighborhood of both vacation properties and a few full-time residents. The community has a small beach on the river that's popular for kayaks and tubing. One of our neighbors, who I do not care for at all, he's just an all-around jerk, and this story kind of shows that, was on the beach with his friends while we were all hanging out in the water on a particularly busy day. The water was packed with people floating by. All of a sudden, our neighbor gets in his golf cart and wordlessly disappears up the dirt road. We didn't think anything of it, and continued to chill on the beach. He comes back 10 minutes later with a full-size whole-body dressed-up mannequin, like one you'd find at a store, head to toe, the complete thing, and swims across the river, climbs up the bank to where there is a large storm drain underneath the main road, and shoves the mannequin in so just her feet and slightly under her knees is visible. People who were floating by thought it was a dead body. After some people asked, our neighbor laughed about it and told them it was just a mannequin he put up there. But apparently the message didn't get through to all the people going by. When we left the beach maybe half an hour after that and were walking back to the house, we nearly got run over by a cop who was flying down the narrow dirt path, easily going 50 in what is supposed to be 10 miles per hour. Surprise, surprise, people called the police to report a potential dead body on the river. I still hate that number. God, this is terrible, but I had a really messed up childhood. My parents were not together and I was being traded off every weekend. It was my dad's weekend and I went over to his house. He was acting super weird the whole day, but I didn't notice it much as a little kid until I looked back on it. I remember him taking me and my little sister to run errands with him. He ran into different places and me and my sister played in the back seat. He stopped at a friend's house and came back flustered and angry and sped out of the driveway. The next couple hours were normal and we were fine, but our dad was super anxious. I remember it being dark outside when he told me and my little sister to get in the car. We drive to a run-down motel on a bad side of town and get out of the car. I asked him what we were doing there and he told me we were hanging out with some of his friends. I didn't think anything of it and we went into the motel room. It was a small room with one bed and a jacuzzi tube beside the tube. Our dad started drinking with a group of guys in the hotel and he told us we could go swimming in the hot tube. We didn't have bathing suits, so he had us in there with just underwear and a t-shirt. After a couple minutes he left without saying anything to us. I asked the guys where my dad went and he told us he would be back in a couple hours. Something in my 7-year-old brain didn't feel right about the situation. One of the guys started talking to my sister and I and acting really friendly. He told us he wanted to get in the hot tube with us and started to undress completely. exposing himself to us. He tried to get really close to us and I held my 3-year-old sister close. This man was completely naked in a hot tube with 2 little girls and our dad wasn't there to stop it. I was really scared and acted like I was taking my sister to the bathroom and went out the front door of the motel, still wet and in our underwear. I held my sister while she cried and we walked down the hallway away from the room. Luckily there was a lady in the hall and she asked if I was lost. I asked her if I could call my mom on her phone to come and get us. Thankfully my mom came right away and after that my dad lost visitation rights. I'm so glad that they forced us to memorize our parents' phone number at school as well. I'm grateful that woman was in the hallway before one of those guys found us. I was in middle school when this occurred, so I was around 12-13 years old. My best friend and I were next door neighbors, so we often walked to and from the bus stop for school. We were walking home one day from the bus stop when an old red pickup truck slowly drove by us. We didn't recognize this red pickup as anyone that lived in the neighborhood. It was a small neighborhood. The truck was going the same way we were walking and we could see the driver lean forward and it looked like he was looking at us. He then sped off down at the end of the block and turned around the corner. My best friend and I looked at each other and said that was weird. We shrugged it off since there were some houses for sale on the block and we did happen to walk by one. We were halfway down the block when the same red truck turned from the corner and was heading towards. He was speeding down the road, but as he approached us he slowed down. The man's driver's side window was now rolled down. I don't remember much of what he looked like, but I do remember him having face tattoos. Now we were worried, as we passed him and he slowly passed us. I happened to look behind me to make sure he was still driving. Nope. His brake lights light up and his truck jerked when he placed it into park. I saw the driver door open and I yelled to my best friend, "Run." We proceed to sprint to my best friend's house since her mom was home and no adult was home at mine. We practically throw open the front door of my best friend's house and slammed the door closed and locked every lock on the door. My best friend's mom was mad at us for slamming the door until we told her what happened. As we were telling her this, the same red pickup truck slowly drove down the street as we watched from the front window. We could see him looking around as he drove slowly. I'm pretty sure to this day he was looking for my best friend and I. This scared her mom enough to call the local police department's non-emergency number. This guy circled the block of my neighborhood twice while she was on the phone with the police department. Police started to patrol the neighborhood, but we didn't see the red pickup truck after the police showed up. I have no idea what happened after that, but we never saw the red pickup truck. We weren't walking to the bus stop for a week after that. My best friend's mom drove us to and from school for that week. When I was like 10 or 11, my friend and I walked to the gas station to get snacks. On our way back, a little red car pulled up. The guy driving rolled down his window and told us he lost his puppy and asked for our help finding it. We said we'd keep an eye out. He replied, "Can one of you get in my car, and I'll drive around, and you look out the passenger side while I look out the driver's side?" That set off immediate red flags, especially as he only wanted one of us to get in. Why are you trying to split up two young girls walking alone? We took off running and he sped off. We told her dad when we got back to her house and he told us we were just making it up. My freshman year in high school, I was taking choir class. We were staying after school practicing for our concert later that month, and one day my teacher ended up calling practice about an hour early. We all started calling our parents to let them know we were finishing practice early that day. One of the girls in my class had left her phone at home that day. She asked if she could use anyone's phone to call her mom. Of course I offered mine and she called her mom. From behind me, where she was sitting, I hear her crying. She asked me what my number was. I was confused, but I recite my number back to her. She still has my phone to her ear and tells me, "Your number is my aunt's old number. She passed a year ago when she called her mom with my cell phone." Her mom received an incoming call from her sister that had passed. It was the craziest, strangest thing. Not scary or bad, but still something I think about. Coming back from a New York Giants football game as a 12-year-old, We were driving past a bunch of old abandoned factories when I saw a teenager in rags and what looked like chains around his body limping away from one of the factories like he just escaped from a horror movie torture chamber. By the time I told my friend's dad, we were already past where I saw the kid. Very strange. I know what I saw that day, and it was something serious. Lots of cultures have stories about weeping or wailing women that waylay travelers and kill them. I can't help but think that those stories might be from people sitting around a campfire at night and then hearing a mountain lion and thinking it's a woman in distress. Some brave and well-meaning soul goes out to help, and then is never seen alive again. If you have never seen picture of what the victim of a mountain lion attack looks like, do yourself a favor and keep it that way. They kill for food, and they can eat a lot in one sitting. They do not leave much behind. Two come to mind. Was 16 and my car broke down in the middle of a very busy intersection. I was pretty flustered as I could tell I was making traffic really congested. Went to call for a tow when a man came out of nowhere in a jumpsuit mechanics wear and just said get in, I'll push, and he pushed me pretty far and around the corner. I immediately got out to thank him and he was gone. This area was very out in the open. There's no chance he could have walked away or even ran away without me seeing. There were also no car shops near this area. I looked everywhere and even asked some people on the street if they saw him, and nobody said they had even saw him. It was a really bizarre event. Working as a CNA, my shift ended at 11:30. It was New Year's and a resident was in her late 90s. All friends and family had passed away and she was there on hospice. She was my last resident. I assisted with medications and bedtime routine when she grabbed my hand and just said, please stay and watch the fireworks with me. I don't want to be alone tonight. It was just something about her eyes that I couldn't say number. I ended up staying for about another hour and she told me stories about her childhood and gave life advice. When I came into work the next day, I hear she had passed away during the night, shortly after I left. In the healthcare field, it's always amazed me how some people just know when it's their time to go. I'll never forget that moment. Also, another one. A few years ago I was walking my friend home from the pub. She lived further away than me, but she was significantly drunker and I didn't want her to walk by herself in the dark. A guy we both knew was at the pub too, and we'd known him for ages, been to school together, etc., but we definitely weren't close. He was one of those really weird kids, but not in a lovable quirky goofball kind of way, if that makes sense, like scary weird. Anyway, he tagged along with us for the walk home, and it was fine because we'd been having a laugh with him all night and he genuinely seemed very different to how he had been in school. However, once we'd reached my friend's house and dropped her off, his tone changed. He started telling me about how if his future girlfriend ever cheated on him, he would kill her, and I can't explain exactly how, but from his tone and demeanor and everything I didn't doubt that for a second. He then proceeded to tell me that if he wanted to, he could easily kill me right now, and dispose of the body in a way that no one would ever find me. All this was being said whilst we were walking down a mile-long pitch-black country road in the middle of nowhere. No street lights, no houses near the road, literally no one else around. When I was younger, I was riding my bike up and down the street when suddenly a car pulled up beside me. Some guy I didn't recognize leaned over and asked me for directions. I honestly didn't know how to get where he was asking, so I said that. The guy responded with, "What? I couldn't hear you. Can you come closer and repeat that?" Alarm bells were ringing, so I shook my head as I took off on my bike. Luckily he didn't follow me, so who knows, maybe he really was an innocent guy who couldn't hear, but I wasn't going to find out. I was getting ready to leave work for the night and the night manager, who had just returned from Iraq, came out to smoke. I remember walking out the door of the Walgreens, feeling utterly terrified, and I turned immediately back into the store. When the manager came back inside, I said, "I need you to walk me all the way to my car. Something's not right." He was like, "Yeah, sure." So he walked with me all the way to my car, checked it, shut my door and he watched me drive away. I found out 2 days later that somebody had gruesomely raped and killed a woman in the parking lot across the street from my store. On the night I had my manager walk me to my car. Holy fuck, that was almost me. I was an 18-year-old Canadian female living in Hong Kong by myself to study Cantonese. One of my good friends wanted to show me Macau. It's been called the Chinese Las Vegas. I agreed, and we boarded the ferry at around 8 at night. It takes about an hour to get there, so we arrived at about 9. We took off to the casinos and had a great night. On a whim, my friend asked me if I wanted to go to mainland China on another ferry from Macau. I had never been to this particular area of China, so I said sure. Problem: my friend went through the immigration for the last ferry, and I was right behind him. I was denied because I didn't have a visitor's visa for mainland China. My friend was Chinese, so he had no problem. 18-year-old me had no idea this was a thing, as Macau and Hong Kong don't require them, and they wouldn't let my friend back in. Best part, my phone was dead. I was kicked out back to the streets of Macau, with no way to contact my friend and no idea how to get back to Hong Kong. At this time it was about 1 a.m. I'm walking the streets, looking in convenience stores for phone chargers, panicking, having no idea what to do. As soon as I left a convenience store, a man come up to me and asked me how much. Mind you, I was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, with running shoes, but that's besides the point. I told him no, and kept walking. He followed me. It's dark, I'm walking down a street, I have no idea where I am, and my phone is dead. I can hear him getting closer behind me. I realize up the street is an alleyway, and I remember thinking this is going to end badly if I don't do something. Just as I suspected, I get closer to the alleyway and I hear him start running up to me. I turned around and his hand was reaching to grab me, and punched him as hard as I could in the face. He didn't fall down, just took a few steps back and held his face. As luck would have it, a taxi was going down the street. I jumped in and just screamed go in Cantonese. I finally managed to find my way back home, but oh my gosh, I was so stupid. When I was 18, I was stalked by a man named Pete at my grocery store job. He was a man in his 50s, 60s. I used to work at the counter, selling cigarettes, lotto, doing small checkouts, etc. This man came in, I kid you not, every single shift that I worked. He'd always come to the counter to check out with me. If for any reason I was helping at the registers, he would come to mine. He would gaze at me in a really creepy way. If I was standing across the store from him, I could feel him staring at me. He began to buy me chocolate every time he came to my register. In the beginning, I'd accept, mainly because I just didn't know what to say or how to politely deny. It got to the point where I'd have bags of Reese's behind the counter. On one occasion, he baked me an entire cake and brought it to the grocery store to give to me in front of everyone. I did not eat it. He also used to come in with this guy whose name I don't remember, but his friend lived 2 houses down from my house at the time. I was living at home with my parents at that time. His friend had a very specific work truck that I recognized wherever it was. His friend would sometimes stare at me if we were both standing outside our houses. I went into the store one day on my day off to get some snacks, and Pete was there with the same friend that he always came in with. I was at lane 1 and he was at some other lane in the back. He stared at me with this borderline evil look on his face, like an utter seriousness. I gave me chills. It got to the point where other employees could sense his weird fixation on me and would go to the extent of sending me to the back office whenever he came in. I'd been telling my parents about Pete, and finally, my dad decided to get involved. We lived literally a block away from the store, so my dad told me that as soon as I saw Pete walk in the store, to text him and he would drive down right away. He'd have ample time since Pete would have to shop first. My dad knew what he looked like from the description I gave him, since Pete always came in his same work shirt, but a gray ponytail, and the same blue bandana around his head. My dad stood right behind Pete in line and witnessed the absolute creep Pete was towards me. On this day, of all days, he finally went to the extent of asking me out on a date. I declined. Pete pushed back, but I continued to decline. My dad walked right out the store behind him. I literally never saw Pete again after that day, and my dad didn't really tell me what he said to him other than that he really shook him up. Anyway, fast forward. One night I'm working at around 9:30 at night. The store closed at 10 p.m. Pete's friend, that lives 2 houses down from me at the time, walks in. He was a quiet guy and didn't really talk much. He walks around the counter heading to the back of the store to shop presumably. I happened to notice through the window that he parked his work truck right next to my car. Remember, I'm very familiar with what his truck looks like. I thought this was strange considering I'd parked in the back of the parking lot earlier that day because there was never parking in the front during the daytime hours. So I definitely thought it was odd that he chose to park all the way back there during this time when it was dead, when there was a bunch of open spots right in the front. Even then, he parks right next to the only car in the back row. He would have known what my car looked like. It was a specific bright blue color and obviously recognizable from my driveway he saw every day. I ended up telling my supervisor about it right then and there. She agreed she felt that it was weird and that she would have me escorted to my car at the end of my shift. I guess we were being a bit loud, because not even 5 seconds later, the guy comes around the counter and walks right out of the store. Never bought anything, and he'd been in there for about 15 minutes. I instantly had this sick feeling that maybe he was plotting on kidnapping me. From that point on, I never saw either of them, and I eventually just stopped working there and got a better job. Made me insanely conscious of my surroundings from that point on.